Wilson Nepoose was wrongfully convicted of murder based on the testimony of 2 lying drunks. He did not survive his ordeal. Wilson Nepoose was a First Nations Creek from the Samson Reserve in Hobbema, Alberta. His ordeal at the hands of the Canadian justice system broke his spirit. Unfortunately, he's not here to tell us his story himself. However,
when you're dealing with a spiritual person out that's passed on, you're giving your respect, your great respect to him and whatnot, and that's what we are doing today. And also welcoming his presence here to guide us in the proper direction. Wilson's spirit was born into this world on March 15th, 1945, at a time when the Cree had already been forced to abandon much of their traditional way of life.
Our people were nomadic people when we moved around, and when the reserve system came, we got locked in. This was a third poor Indian reserve, in one of the poorest Indian reserves in Canada. You see the house as you're coming in. We grew up in that home, and there was my parents, 7 of us, brothers and 4 sisters. Wilson was my older brother.
My Cree spirit name is Walking Wolf. My English name is Willie Littlechild. And I grew up with late Wilson at the residential school. The fondest reflection I have is the playful spirit. Most of us ended up in residential schools because there's no jobs around here for our families to raise us properly and whatnot. When you break the love of the mother and the child and the parents and the child, you destroy the individual, and that's what happened to us. The loss of something valuable make people do crazy things. And Wilson was a product of that. He drank like I did, and a lot of people who have gone to residential school, and then the sudden influx of money coming in added to the fire.
As Wilson was growing up, life for the Samson Cree Nation and the other reserves that make up Hobbema was turned upside down with the discovery of oil.
It was like winning a big lottery when oil and gas was discovered on our territories.
Initially, when the oil was produced, you can back up your car and just put the oil in there. That's how pure it was.
Back in the mid-'80s, the oil was flowing and everybody got a piece of the money.
They didn't go and buy a bottle of whiskey back then. They would go out and they would buy a case of whiskey. They were constantly on 24-hour, 48 days on end. A lot of people in the community were in this vicious cycle, getting progressively worse in their alcoholism, getting in trouble, going to jail, coming out, having money that had saved up over the months that they were in jail.
From my own experience as a member of the RCMP, you get fed up with the same person being intoxicated, causing problems and disturbances and so on. Over and over again, all you can do is enforce the law, which is to pick that person up and incarcerate them, bring them to court, and let the justice system deal with them.
I just dread the thought of where I would have ended up had I not been an athlete or had not been participating in sports. I could have been dead on some street somewhere, for all I know. I chose to leave the reserve to get a better education. The flight of late Wilson's path is different in a sense that you at one moment have this joyful bird that's flying in a spiritual way, in a sense, expressing his life, and all of a sudden feathers are plucked from your wings and you start slowing down in a way and you take a different path.
By 1986, Wilson, age 40, was an extreme alcoholic. In January, he was admitted to the hospital. Released a few weeks later, he went right back to the bottle.
He was either drunk on reserve, in detox, or in jail.
But it wasn't anything, outrageous like what he got charged with. It was all either a drinking problem or a drinking related thing.
He had a couple of girlfriends, one in particular, and he treated her pretty good. He had a pride when he had a woman on his arm.
He was a philosopher. He was a poet.
He wasn't an educated man, but I guess from being in jail, he did a lot of reading, so he had a lot of knowledge. He had his own perspective of things.
Wilson was just a happy-go-lucky person. He liked his booze.
They would pick up their alcohol and come back and drink on reserve. So Lester had a fairly good eye on them.
At the end of June of that year, misfortune was brewing for Wilson, and unknown to his family then, where he was on 4 days in particular, what he did, and who witnessed it, would become incredibly important. On the first day in question, the family was building a fence.
I had bought some posts and lumber, so I had a crew of my family members. We had a number of people that were doing the fence here, and they were drinking at the same time as they were working on the fence. And Wilson was there.
Lester was really into garage sailing, so every Saturday we would go.
While Wilson and the boys continued work on the fence, Lester and Debbie went to town. On their way home, they ran into someone who would soon play a pivotal role in the lives of the family.
There was an Indian woman that was hitchhiking. Lester recognized this lady.
Lily Mekano was from the next neighboring band.
She told me, little things about herself, and we chatted, how people will chat in a vehicle when you're going on a trip, and we were coming home.
Lester and Debbie had no idea that a few weeks later, Lily, who was known on the reserves as one of the local drunks, would tell the police that on that very day, she had witnessed Wilson commit murder.
On the next day, the community has a feast for the people that have passed on. Wilson was one of the people serving.
There's sometimes about 100 people that show up there.
On the Monday, the 23rd of June, Wilson was out drinking, doing what Wilson does.
In fact, Wilson and his buddies were at a motel in Ponoka. One of the bunch had registered a room and the party was on. At some point, Wilson had had his fill and wanted to go home.
I got a collect call from Wilson. He said that he was at Rancher's Inn with Elmer Okinan, their cousin. He wanted Lester to go pick him up.
She passed that on to Lester, and Lester went to the Rancher Inn and picked up Wilson and brought him home, and he spent the night.
So we knew where he was from the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. Not that I ever thought that we would need to know every detail of that weekend.
2 days later, the naked body of a woman is found in a gravel pit near Ponoka.
The first thing that the RCMP had to do was to identify the body. If the deceased had a criminal record, her fingerprints would be registered in Ottawa. The sergeant that took the fingerprints sent them in backwards, so there was no identification made in spite of the fact that her fingerprints were there. And so the investigation centered in the area where the body was found. They took a photo of the death mask of the deceased, and they began seeking any type of recognition from anyone as to whether or not they knew this person.
Nobody seemed to know who this lady was.
3 days later, the investigation would catch up to Wilson during the Ponoka stampede.
We were coming out of Ponoka. Lester seen Wilson, and it is a known fact that if you are an Indian from Hobbema, a drinker, known to police, you are going to jail.
They don't want them to be bothering the visitors that are coming from all over to come to the rodeo.
So he just went and he said, get in the truck, we'll get you to the reserve and you won't end up in the tanks.
So we were on our way home. They stopped us, and I asked him, what was the problem, and he said, there's Wilson Nepoose here. And he said, we'd like to have a word with you.
I suppose, having nothing to go on, they would begin with members in the area that had criminal records. And they interviewed Wilson if he recognized this woman. He said he'd never seen her. They simply finished with their interview with him and released him and carried on.
Phone to go get picked up, and that's when we were told that he was being questioned about the lady that was found. We were thinking, well, why you? And he said, well, I don't know, that I think they're just questioning everybody. But why pick you up and question you,
Well, people that know him, moettegui tahiut isotnioga ja uiki totak. Ika mautsumatsip matsi mina muutsumustats
2 weeks would go by without incident until one day, Wilson would cross paths with Lily Mackinac, and before the night was through, life as he knew it would be over for good. Wilson was at his older brother Henry's. Henry was away, but 2 acquaintances dropped by, Lily Mackinac and her friend Delma Bull. Wilson asked them in for a drink. While they socialized, he mentioned he had been questioned about the dead woman found near Ponoka. Soon, Lily went her way and Wilson left with Delma and some friends to picnic near a lake. Meanwhile, Lily continued to drink heavily and let her imagination run wild. When the RCMP officers investigating the murder came calling, she would have quite a story to tell.
She said something to the effect that Wilson killed her. This investigator then went back and reported to his superiors what he had learned, and immediately was sent back out to find Lily Mackinac and get a more extensive statement from her. They could not locate her, so the word went out to arrest Wilson Nepoose.
By the time Wilson got back to his brother's home, the RCMP were waiting.
At the time of the arrest, Delma Bull indicated that Wilson had threatened her with this knife that he had taken along to cut wiener sticks. And that is what got Delma Bull involved in the investigation.
Lester and Debbie, who were out of town, would only learn about the arrest later that evening.
We got told Wilson was being charged for a murder. And then we all just lost it. What murder? Where?
They immediately set off for home, planning to call a local lawyer that they knew. Meanwhile, Wilson's pleas of innocence fell on deaf ears.
In the Bible, it says you tell the truth, you'll be set free. Not in an Indian country. You tell the truth, you get punished for it.
An unidentified dead woman was found near Ponoka, Alberta. Wilson Nepoose, a Cree from a reserve nearby, was arrested for her murder.
He was just pissed off. How could they ever lay a charge? I don't even know this person.
Unfortunately, Lily Mackinac and Delma Bull would say otherwise. Lily claimed she picked up the deceased with Wilson and Elser Nepoose in Ponoka, and they went on a drinking binge that ended up at the gravel pile site. Wilson told the deceased to take her clothes off, then raped and choked her. Since Lily was so drunk, she passed out.
She said that she woke up and Elser and Wilson came running back to the car. They were out of breath, they had red stains on their clothes, and they had the deceased's clothing, which Wilson told Lily to burn. Delma Bull, the story that she gave was that she had been driving past the Ponoka dump, was flagged down by Elser Nepoose.
She said Elser told her he was having car trouble. She drove into the dump and saw Wilson and the deceased sitting there. On occasion, Delma overheard Lily being questioned nearby, and their stories matched. At other times, they didn't. But the RCMP had a solution for that.
They took 4 statements from Delma Bull and 11 from Lily Mackinac. Only 6 of the statements from Lily were presented to the defense.
Lily and Delma put my nephew Elser Nepoose in the same place as Wilson.
Elser was also interrogated.
The way they were trying to do it didn't work out because Elser had a good alibi. Never once did they call me or my wife to testify or even question us.
As for Wilson, he was transferred to the Edmonton Remand Center, and that's where he stayed until trial. But before then, the family decided to change lawyers.
Voices of authority within the family suggested that we get another lawyer. Burke Barker, we were told, was a law professor and one of the best legal minds in the province of Alberta.
We had one of the top lawyers. To us, a top lawyer, they do their job.
We were fairly confident that we were going to beat this charge. That was our first mistake.
As the family prepared Wilson's defense, there was a breakthrough for the RCMP.
The deceased was identified as Marie Rose Desjardins from Edmonton. They went into her apartment and they fingerprinted it, and they got 5 sets of fingerprints. And they only tested them against Wilson. There was no match. There was nothing at the scene that connected Wilson to the crime.
The RCMP, in the grips of tunnel vision, did not even look for any other suspects. Meanwhile, Delma Bull wanted to retract her testimony, but the Crown would let nothing destroy its case, and she was not allowed.
At the preliminary hearing, the defense learned the case that the Crown had against Wilson Nepoose, which was primarily the evidence submitted by Lily Mackinac and Delma Bull.
I was surprised who the witnesses against Wilson were. Lily Mackinac was a drinker to about the same extent that Wilson, and the other witness, Delma Bull, she'd be very easy to intimidate. They called her Mouse, which gives you an indication of her personality.
They were alcoholics, were drunks. If you're going to use a witness, you have an upstanding citizen. And then they set the dates.
They said the murder was committed between the 20th and the 23rd. So we had the Friday covered, the Saturday, the Sunday. The Monday, he was with Elmer Okinan.
I don't even think that they had an idea when this person's life was taken.
The pathologist determined that the death had occurred by strangulation, and he found post-mortem markings, and he concluded that the body had been brought to the site where it was found and dumped there.
His findings contradicted much of the testimony of the witnesses, but the defense did not do much about it. The witnesses themselves contradicted each other.
There was a conflict regarding the date of the murder. Lily Mackinac claimed it was the 20th of June. Delma Bull claimed that it was the 23rd, and she was positive about that because that was the day she cashed her family allowance check. The Crown prosecutor ordered the RCMP to obtain the canceled check, but that check was never introduced into evidence. The Crown indicated that Lily Mackinac was in error about the date and fixed the date of the murder as the 23rd of June.
Wilson and family were confident as they prepared for trial. After all, he had an alibi.
He had been at the Rancher Inn in one of the rooms there with a number of friends at a party.
Wilson wanted to testify in his own defense, but his lawyer advised against it.
I believe that he judged Wilson, and in a negative way, by his appearance, by his lifestyle. And we accepted that because he was a law professor. That was a mistake.
By the time the trial began, 10 months after Wilson had been arrested, the witness that could have helped the defense was gone.
The pathologist had gone back to England, and rather than bring him back and have him testify before the jury, they simply read in his testimony from the preliminary hearing.
I sat there knowing that this is my brother-in-law's life at stake, and it was boring. Our defense lawyer had no opportunity to cross-examine him. How could the defense ask questions about the marks that were on the body? Was she murdered there?
Due to the fact that there was no disturbance of the grass or vegetation where the body was found, the murder had not occurred there. It was not pointed out to the jury the enormous conflict that the pathologist's testimony created with regards to the testimony of Lily Mackinac that the murder had occurred at the gravel pile site.
It was also not pointed out that while Lily testified that the murder occurred in the afternoon, Delma testified that she saw the deceased resurrected and standing in the middle of the Ponoka dump, alive and well, at 10:30 p.m. of the very same day.
My brother was being railroaded to a charge that he never committed.
I was very emotional in court. Wilson, on the other hand, sat there, just writing things down, not showing emotion.
He had time to sober up. He was clean. His spirit was intact.
He knew that he did not commit this murder. Lester paid more attention to the jury than anything else.
There were a white juror.
A lot of white people judged Wilson on his appearance, not knowing the man inside. He was a rough-looking Native person, so they probably already had in their mind, yeah, he probably is guilty.
The Crown had a final nail to drive into Wilson's coffin.
Wilson Nepoose's alibi was
He was at the Rancher's Inn in Elmer Okanan's room.
the Crown prosecutor brought all the registration cards for that day, the 23rd.
Wilson knew he was in room 205, and they checked that card. I can't tell you the effect that it had when the prosecutor showed the jury the card. Wilson Nepoose is lying about that date because, yes, somebody was in room 205, but the name is not Elmer Okanan. Our alibi got shot out of the water. Had we seen the card, we would have known the name on the card. Yes, Elmer paid for the room, but he didn't register the room. Their other buddy did, who is a family friend, and that was Leonard DeRocher.
Unfortunately, they would only find this out 5 years later.
I think it took 2 days before they decided how they were going to go with if they were going to convict him or not.
And when they said guilty, it was like taking a shot.
And he got life 15, and we all of us just freaked out. We couldn't believe it. And I told him it's not over. I'll be there beside you. It was hard.
Lester took this so personal. It's like he had let his brother down. It was a very rough moment.
He stood up and said to the judge and asked him, how come he never called me to the stand?
He yelled that he didn't kill this woman, that he was innocent. And his anger was expressed that he didn't do this.
RCMP were coming out of there laughing. They won on lies. On lies. They won. They had no facts. They had just pitiful drunks that were there convicting my brother. I promised that I wasn't going to give up. There was no way I was going to give up. And I didn't.
Wilson Nepoose was sentenced to life for murder, even though he was innocent. But his brother was not about to give up on him.
We were making a stand, saying, okay, we have another shot. There's an appeal coming up. He knew a lawyer that had gotten him out on a charge one time, and he said this lawyer is really good. We met him on the highway someplace and paid him cash. They didn't want a check, it was cash.
I think his fee was $10,000.
It was dismissed by the Alberta Court of Appeal.
He was very disappointed, and then we were wondering, why are we paying these lawyers so much money and they're not doing anything? What are we doing wrong here?
Lester was determined to keep fighting this.
We're going to take the Supreme Court of Canada now, and we got to get a lawyer.
There were a few out of Edmonton that seemed to win their cases. We hired Brian Barish.
Another lawyer, another straight cash deal. Where do we get the money again? We had horses, we had a little farm. All that, just everything that we had just went down.
We finally got a date to get one chance to speak to the Supreme Court of Canada. So our lawyer was headed to Ottawa.
One day I got a call from Brian Barish, come and have lunch with me, I'm buying.
He said, I have bad news. The Supreme Court will not hear our case for Wilson. He told us, that's it. It's over.
I said, it may be over for you, but it ain't over for me. If I have to prove my brother's innocence, if I have to walk to Ottawa, I'll do it.
At that point, I knew we were in for the fight of our life.
I remember phoning him and telling him.
He took a downward spiral, and the penitentiary authorities, psychiatrists, psychologists, put him on heavy medication. He was so heavily medicated, he would sit there with a cigarette, and the cigarette would burn right down to his fingers. And nothing. And we'd sit there for long periods where he wouldn't communicate with us. His spirit was getting farther and farther away from him, like he was dying. Murder is not something that Native people take lightly. It causes great shame to the individual, but even greater shame to their family, who has to be in the community. And I think he wore that. He owned that in jail.
Wilson had no idea that back home, the truth would soon begin to emerge. One evening, Lily Mackinac paid a neighbor a visit.
Lily Mackinac went to her house and she was a little bit inebriated, and she asked her for a ride to town to go and get more booze because they ran out of booze.
Knowing Lily would not take no for an answer, Peggy drove her to town and waited while a friend of Lily's went to get the booze, hardly suspecting what she would learn.
They were waiting there for a bit. Finally, Lily said, "Geez, this guy's taking a long time. I'm not allowed in that place." I don't know what made me ask her why.
I remember Wilson Nepoose keiskeest, kun tegu mihtata manum ka kuitsemak. Ega te peamagi kahtaabmak. Eks uskots nu ihtamag. Otan moi kaga aujassuatit. Egi misaga memegi kiaskia kehtuit. Ega heihtuetta ja ta pojana mua no joku nian hiutsin pahat tehtuit. Yksinkin pakoatiin.
Lily died accidentally in a house fire not long after, but her roadside confession would not go forgotten. As for Wilson, his spirit clung to his family to keep him from drowning in despair.
Our fight made him want to fight.
Although his situation seemed beyond hope, Wilson reached out for help. He wrote letters.
These letters had come to the attention of the RCMP, and they were conducting a review of the case.
But from Wilson's perspective, help did not come, and his resolve was dying.
He'd go into that stupor again.
I remember going twice that he didn't take a shower. He was just existing in there. And I thought, what the hell is the matter with you? Why are you giving up? We're not giving up on you.
As Wilson's spirit shrunk, Lester's became more determined.
They needed to find another solution, and they turned to Jack Ramsey, an ex-RCMP officer who had helped the Samson Band in the past.
When they tell me that someone is innocent who's been convicted by a judge and jury, they have to show me the evidence to support that.
Jack was semi-interested at first, and then when we started telling him the details, he just locked with us on our journey.
They knew where Wilson was on the date that the murder was alleged to have occurred. Well, that's pretty strong evidence. And the fact that they had never been interviewed by the police meant to me that it was an incomplete police investigation. And this is very serious, because an incomplete police investigation has been ruled by the courts to be evidence of malice. So I read the transcript of the trial, and I could not believe that any jury could convict anyone based upon the contradictory, inconsistent evidence against Wilson Nepoose. I couldn't believe it.
Jack would then meet Wilson face to face.
I think it's the first time Jack may have experienced such an ugly place. You go inside the front doors, and that's it. There's no more sight into the world. It's in a box, and that's it. You can look up, but there's no more vision out.
We were sitting there waiting for him to come in, and he just shuffled in like a zombie. It was disheartening to see what had happened to what I considered to be an innocent man. But how do we get him out? You need new evidence. I asked him for the names of the people that were with him at the Rancher Inn. I turned to the photographs of all the cards that had been registered at the Rancher Inn, and I simply went to room 205. And here there was a scrawl of a signature.
The name was Leonard DeRocher, but they would have quite a time finding him.
This man had a drinking problem. He was on Skid Row.
We went to Edmonton to several Skid Row bars. We found Leonard. He was a bit taken aback by the fact that him being in that room with Wilson was so important. And he was more than willing to make an affidavit or tell whomever that Wilson was there that day.
Jack did a lot of research. All hours of the night, he'd be phoning 3, 4 o'clock in the morning.
You said he was at the Rancher's Inn. I had to relive that day, minute by minute, until it suddenly came to me that I had taken a collect call. Jack made me search until I found the phone bill. You know what he said? Prove that's the phone number. It had changed owners and the phone number was different. I had to go back into archives at newspapers and I found an advertisement, Rancher's Inn, and this phone number. That's the way Jack was.
After I had completed my investigation, I had about a 12-page brief prepared, outlining why I believe a review of the case was necessary. I was going to get in the car and deliver it, and I was prompted to get a hold of Delma Bull, and they didn't know where Delma Bull was. So I simply went to the telephone directory and went to the Bulls. In about 10 minutes, I was talking to Delma. I said, I'm investigating the death of that Indian lady whose body was found at the gravel pile site. And she said, I don't want to talk about that. And I said, Delma, evidence has come forward indicating that Wilson may not have been guilty. And then she said, I tried to tell the police that I did not know that woman, I had never seen her, but they wouldn't listen to me. They kept twisting my words and putting words in my mouth. Really, that is what got the ball rolling, was the recanting by Delma Bull.
To this day, I honor that woman, for her truth.
It was through Delma that they learned what the witnesses had been through. Delma had been threatened that her kids would be taken away.
A mother, that's her life, the kids. And when you use that on a woman, of course, they're going to do anything to protect their kids. That's what Delma did.
Lily, on the other hand, was a very serious drinker. The RCMP would pick her up drunk. Then they'd take her to the cells for hours. You're sobering up there with this horrible hangover, with shakes and throwing up.
Lily was throwing up blood.
Given what they learned, they went to the media.
It came out that everybody started realizing something's come up.
It was through a reporter that they found out that the Supreme Court bid had been lost because their lawyer missed the date.
This guy took our money and ran and lied to us.
They reported him, and he got a $2,500 fine. Soon after, Peggy also came to see Lester and told him about Lily's confession.
He got charged and sentenced on lies.
Muamiksi keittiönä meidän utsihtaate somaa ja Jack Ramsey kui ooma. Tuonne koittakaa keittämään yktaa ja ja kehuekin kiiteittämään ja huitsiaksi katsotte kiinan askumkeko.
I eventually obtained a statement from her and turned that information over to the RCMP sergeant that was doing a review of the case.
The family now needed to get yet another lawyer. This time, it was Bob Sachs.
He did whatever it took to bring this back to the court.
But would their efforts bear fruit? Wilson Nepoose was serving life for a murder he did not commit, while his family fought to free him.
I was wrongly convicted for something I didn't do. I try not to think about it, and I'll keep hoping that something happens this time and that'll set me free. I still can't accept it, right? Even today. I get bitter sometimes, really bitter, but I got self-control. I can control my feeling, my emotion. That's the way I've been all my life.
Is that right?
In a loner all my life.
After nearly 5 years in jail, the justice he was denied finally shined its light on Wilson.
The Attorney General of Alberta recommended to the Federal Justice Minister that the case be reviewed. The Federal Justice Minister put it in the hands of the Alberta Court of Appeal, and they struck a special commission of inquiry.
To me, Kim Campbell is my hero. It took a woman to listen to us. I keep that in my heart.
The Special Commission would vindicate Wilson Nepoose.
He was sitting there as calm as he can be, listening to all this.
I don't know that he wanted to open his heart to any feelings, because you can only take so much pain.
Delma Bull's family allowance check played a very important part in the review of the case. It wasn't cashed on the 23rd, it was cashed on the 21st of June. Peggy Okanan reiterated her story to the commission.
Eksaja, gauitamo autsito. Tas kutsumanotskapisyyp, tamo tahtuamme ja ispaikapisyyp, tamo tektomo mutekipetta kohtean.
Delma Bull recanted her testimony before the Special Commission of Inquiry. So that left the Crown with absolutely no evidence whatsoever against Wilson Nepoose.
Wilson also testified this time.
When the report from the Special Commissioner was presented to the Alberta Court of Appeal, they declared that a miscarriage of justice had occurred. A new trial was ordered.
He was released on bail, but he was not exonerated. They didn't say he didn't kill this woman.
We got him out, but he wasn't the same man that went in. The man was destroyed. His spirit was not there.
Indeed, as they headed home to Hobbema, Wilson was alone on a dark and somber interior journey that his loved ones would not be able to divert, although they would valiantly continue to fight for him, starting with a press conference demanding a public inquiry.
I have no intentions of holding a public inquiry in this matter.
They would then take it directly to the people, starting a petition.
We started the petition here at Samson Cree Nation, and after that I took it to the streets. Altogether we gathered about 12,000 names. And I'm pretty sure all those people that signed the petition were curious, what went wrong.
I believe that there are many aspects of this case that the administration of justice does not want revealed. That's why there was no public inquiry. The Attorney General said to the Nepoose family, the RCMP are going to do an internal investigation. It revealed that the whole of the investigation had been improperly handled. My first love was the RCMP. I spent 14 years with that force. They're a great police force. And when these kinds of cases go sideways, like this one did, it damages my first love.
To expedite the process, they may sometimes charge the nearest person they can find, the most susceptible person.
Pehtawan, msuini hiyo skamgak. Ega katawa ki totawa chikni hiyo isino hokis magansak. Namuego.
Wilson Nepoose had to wait a year before he eventually knew that the Crown was not going to proceed against him with a new trial. That's the only way he would have been able to clear his name. The Crown entered a stay of proceedings and nothing further was done.
To Wilson, it was like, these people still think I'm guilty.
Next step was the lawsuit.
Money from the government would mean that he had been wronged.
But time passed with no results, and Wilson was withdrawing further into himself and his pain.
He would go walking by himself. He was gone for like a week one time. We couldn't find him anywhere. He was sleeping in bales. He was eating plain bread. And he was just trying to deal with his heavy heart. It was a winter of no snow, the brown Christmas, and we lost Wilson again. We didn't know where he was. New Year's Eve, the day started out warm, and by midnight, the temperature had dropped to -30, and there was a horrible blizzard where nobody went anywhere, just like that. After the blizzard cleared up and we still hadn't found Wilson, Lester went around asking everybody again. Lester even walked the bushes, for some sign.
We're very concerned, the family and friends, and what happened is we went all over and put posters in the cities.
In every bar, in every store, cafeteria, to see if anybody had seen his brother. He checked a lot of the rehabs around the province. Nobody had seen him.
Between January and February, we had about 50 members of Samson Cree Nation. They went through this whole area here, and they went through the whole quarter, more or less, looking for my brother. And at the time, there was nothing to be found.
And then there was somebody out and about in the spring, and they found a bone. They went closer and they found his wallet. He apparently had went out behind his sister's house all by himself, probably drinking, passed out, and then the weather hit. And that's how he died.
The inspector came and told us that they found remains. We didn't get to view it till later on that evening at the RCMP.
They took us into a room, and on the table was a skull and a few bones, a partial plate. And that's what Lester seen of his brother.
Seeing those remains I had no words. Our lives were shattered.
We fought so hard to get him out. And that's what there was. A few little bones. So when we had the healing circle, that's what I dealt with. I never wanted to go back to that.
I often wondered what would have happened to Wilson if he had not been charged. What would have happened to Wilson if we hadn't got him out of jail? He might be alive today. I don't know.
If they believed him, he would have been alive today.
I let it rest, but Wilson was not my blood brother. He was Lester's, and the healing circle didn't do it for Lester.
Yes, I said that I was going to put it away, but realistically I didn't. I remember going to the law firm and telling him I want the whole case. I didn't know that I was doing time with him. I didn't know that him dying, a piece of me did die, but there was also a piece of me that wanted the story to end in a better way. I got chills in my back when I said that. I believe that he's here with me, you know. Hans Tess. Sino hisuman tahkunino. No paktininega. Saatsego ase anchimon. Tachimuhtano. Huichinega kueskap matsian. Eksego akistakas poitiin. Hi. I hope this is it.
Telling stories like Wilson's gives us an opportunity to then improve the system, because they tell us in some cases what was wrong. While it's a very, very serious and difficult circumstance for the individual, they're still helping to improve the justice system. So in a way, yes, their life is tragic, but at the same time, there's a positive purpose for it, because others benefit from the improvement of the system that they bring about.
Hopefully in the future, other First Nations people will, be accorded the so-called justice of the legal system.
Hopefully he's looking down at us and nodding his head, saying, that's what I was after. Justice, I guess, is what one could say if you could look and you could see, and he's looking down and say, yeah, that's it, justice. So I'm thinking that yes, he's happy in a spiritual way, and we're happy in a human way because of what he did for us. So.
The lawsuit started by Wilson Nepoose was finally settled, but it meant little by then.
We had lost Wilson.
Lily Mackinac had died before she could be brought to justice for the lies that convicted Wilson Nepoose. As for Delma Bull, she was tried for perjury. In the end, what we know is that Marie-Rose Desjardins was murdered by someone But not Wilson Nepoose. Tragically, both are in the spirit world today. As for the actual murderer,
Niuiamana imantoni itaman. Namuega pega sino skitama unan mi gihtotak. Magais kattoak. Moi vihtamok. Eksego hiuanaga skitak uhtawistekuta. Kikapu kivikai kattawa gihtotak mantonax.
Aspeninga gipninga no tago. Minuguta hoge. Enkä musta mua kaikki. Ai.